Hey everyone, what's going on? It's Moose here with Airguns of Michigan, and today we are going to go revisit the Aselkon MX7 Max 5 in camo. And today I'm actually going to show you guys how to access your regulator and then make the appropriate adjustments. So I do want to start off with a little disclaimer. Number one, these are very high pressure air guns. And if you do not know what you're doing, I highly recommend not doing this at home. If you are not comfortable, if you have never disassembled a high pressure gun, please right now stop. Ixnay, no way. Do not get yourself hurt. This is dangerous to work with, and I'm just throwing that out there. Also, you are potentially going to void the warranty on your Aselkon. So if you're not prepared to deal with the potential repercussions of damaging your gun to the point of no repair without ordering extra parts, please, at this point, stop. Do not follow this video. Everything that I'm doing on this gun is at my own risk. This is my personal gun, so whatever happens, happens. Now, I have, in all honesty, already taken this gun apart. I've already done all these adjustments before, so I'm pretty in tune with what's going on. There are going to be a few things in here that I'm not going to be able to show you because I'm going to do them a different way, but I am going to tell you how I suggest that you go about doing these modifications, especially to this regulator. All right, so first things first, let's go ahead and get our scope unmounted off of our gun. This is my Monstrum Alpha Series 6-24 by 50. Love this reticle, love this scope. All right, let's go ahead and set that down. And then from this point, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and remove the stock from the gun. Now, you may have a different Aselkon that still has the same type of regulator, and you may have a different way to remove this compared to what I am, but a 6mm Allen into this bolt down here below. We'll go ahead and release this stock from this gun. And there we go. Stock's off the gun. And at this point, the next thing that we need to do is drain the air from the gun. All right, so number one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that my safety switch is on safe. I do not want accidental discharge. And then the way that Aselkon actually says to drain the air from these is by loosening your gauges. Now, I want to be very careful, or I want to be very clear on something. When I say loosen, I mean to the point where they start to leak air. Do not go in here and start wrenching this thing around, because if you unthread this all the way, right now there is a 160 bar in my gun, and that now becomes a projectile, the same as a pellet or a slug. So we do not want 160 bar blowing this off into our faces. So it only takes a little bit. There you go. Like a quarter turn. You can hear the air leaking. I'm going to do the same thing to my regulator side. There you go. I mean, literally like an eighth of a turn. An eighth and a quarter, and they're leaking. So we're going to sit and wait for this to drop. It drops relatively quick. If you're not comfortable doing this, technically you can cock and dry fire the gun repetitively, and it will drain the air the same way. It just takes a little bit longer, and considering that we want to make sure that we even have, even all the air out, to me, this is just a quicker way to do it, and that's that. So we're gonna wait for this to finish draining. In the meantime, while we're waiting for that, I usually use like a 1.5 millimeter Allen. Definitely get yourself some kind of magnetic tray or some place to put all your parts. I am working on a carpeted surface. However, I also have a magnet off to my left that I use to pick up parts that I may drop and then miss. So with this, we're just going to push out the pin that holds the, of course I dropped, oh no, it's right up there on the gun. And we're going to set that in the tray. And what this does is this is actually connects the linkage to the sear pin here. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And we can turn the gun over and continue to wait for air. While we're doing that, I think it's a 3 millimeter Allen into the top rail bolt. I'll show you that top rail bolt right here. It's just that little shiny silver bolt. We do not need to remove the barrel to do this, so not a big deal. We're just going to back this screw out all the way. We're going to grab that screw, put it into our magnetic tray. I highly recommend getting a magnetic tray, guys. I really, truly do. It just keeps really good track of all your parts. The other thing that I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to remove the Donnie FL that I have up here. And it is on there pretty good because this is a tension barrel. So I'm just going to unscrew this. And then I'm going to pull this entire barrel assembly and the trigger mechanism right separate from the gun. Setting it gently behind me. And we are getting really super low on air. Just going to open these up a little bit more by hand. I mean, we're like well below 20 bar. So just trying to make sure that we get all the air out of these the best that we can. So this is going to be a little bit of a long video, but if you have an Aselkon, you're looking to remove the part or the regulator, this is what you're going to watch. So I don't really hear any more air. So on the bottom here, you're going to get a flathead screw right there. And then in there is an Allen that we're going to get to. So we're going to go ahead and back off this flathead. We're going to drop it right into the metal pan. We're going to grab our 3 millimeter. And this is the other basically just a little, there you go, you can see it right there. It's 3 millimeter. Take that off, and at this point our entire tube is going to come separate from the block. All right, so we're going to set our block down, and this is where you're going to have to get some specialty tools. And when I say specialty tools, I mean a 10. This is an M10-1. So it is a 10 millimeter bolt, extra fine. You can find these at Ace Hardware. That's where I got mine. Basically, just go in the aisle, go look for the 10 millimeters, find yourself an extra fine one. And the reason that we're going to do that is because we're going to unscrew our bottle regulator. You can leave this one in there. It's still loose from us loosening it up, but for right now, we're just going to remove that gauge. We're then going to take our 10 millimeter extra fine and we're going to screw it into the port where the gauge was. And I'm going to explain in a second. You'll see why. I need to grab my cheap wood as I tried to do it inside of these plastic or rubber housings for my vise. It just wasn't enough. This is in there really, really tight. And And when I say really, really tight, I mean really, really tight. So what I found is that this is just cupboard liner, okay? So it gives it something a little grippy to kind of grab onto. A couple pieces of scrap wood inside your vise. And it's going to take me a second here. This is such a pain in the rear, but it is a necessary step in this process. So you want to kind of get your tube into such a position that you can really put some good force on it. This is why we use wood, because the wood is actually going to give before like the tube or anything else does. Okay, so now it's in there pretty good. Basically we're going to go ahead and put a wrench, just a regular wrench, on the end of this bolt, just to give us a little bit more leverage, and just go ahead and turn it. All right, so now what we're doing is we're separating the regulator end from the fill tube itself. Okay, so there we have it. Now we have our regulator and our plenum here, and then the connector, and then this is the block that goes between our fill tube and here. Now I do need to remove this because we're going to need our vise again for another part that we're going to remove. So once we've done that, you can just go ahead and leave the bolt installed, but you'll also notice now that there are 3 Allen heads. These are 4mm. We're going to go ahead and crack those loose and remove them. I hope you guys are following all this. And if you guys have any questions, by all means, post a comment. I'll certainly, answer you the best that I can. I actually got to meet with the Aselkon technicians over in Turkey. So everything that I'm showing you is exactly how they do it. And, we shouldn't have any problems. Whatever you guys need. So now we've got those 3 out. Now I want you to understand that in between this block and this regulator housing, there's an O-ring. So just be aware of that when you break this apart, because I've had my O-ring jump out and and it lands on my table. But just go ahead and give it a little twist and a little pull, and there it goes. It comes apart, and of course my O-ring came out. So just lay that in our parts tray. Now this is your regulator inside the housing. You do not need to remove anything else to get this regulator out. But I do want to show you the way that Aselkon's, their normal way that they remove it. Now, I was unable to do this, and that's why I reached out to them, is you will see there is a little brass nipple inside of there. And it does thread into the regulator. The way that they recommend doing this is to reach in with a pair of needle nose or, small pliers, grab a hold, and then pull the regulator out. However, mine will not come out that way. All right, so I just want to show you guys also that you can actually unscrew this. And you can see this little brass piece comes out, and then there's your regulator. What I do is I leave mine installed. And what they recommended, and my way is very similar, is to take a tap, like a tap for retapping a bolt or a hole, and running it into the brass gently to the point where, let's say you chose a 2mm tap or a 3mm tap. I have yet to do it this way with the taps, so I can't speak to that yet. But I will, and I will let you know. And then once you tap the tip of this out, then you can put a bolt in it so that you can lock the bolt into a vise or get a better grip with a pair of pliers and then pull the regulator out. However, the way that I decided to go about this, and I have to warn you guys, please please listen to everything that I'm about to say, because if you are not comfortable doing this, please stop right now. Don't continue to do this without having some kind of general idea of how this works. So what I did was I took a deck screw, okay? A very aggressive threaded deck screw. Basically the same thing as what a tap would do, and then a bolt into this as well. I gently inserted it into the brass, and I just slowly turned it in with a Phillips head screwdriver. Now, this is where this gets important. And let me back this out because I want to show you firsthand. You are not trying to drive this thing so far into this regulator that you destroy that little orifice. Oh, where am I at? There I am. That little orifice on the other side of this little brass fitting. So if you look at my screw and how far it goes in, it basically only goes in about one thread, which is all it took for me to remove my regulator. So I want to just, I cannot stress enough to you guys the importance of being very cautious about how deep you set that screw. If you do not feel comfortable using a screw, which I completely understand, go out and find yourself a tap and a bolt that will do the exact same thing. Either way, you are only going to go into the very tip of this brass. You do not want to puncture a hole all the way through that brass, destroying the nipple on the other side, okay? That's the best advice that I can give you, okay? I mean, seriously, I mean, I had to figure this out, and, you know, basically, when I brought it up to Aselkon, you know, about, you know, tapping that out or putting a bolt in it, they said, absolutely. I did not ask about a screw, but I have not had any problem, and I've had this thing apart probably 8 or 9 times. So we're good to go. Be careful. I am not liable for you overly cranking that, splitting that brass, destroying your nipple, whatever. I'm telling you, you only need to screw it in. Basically, all I did, literally, guys, is I just stuck the screw in there and I turned the screwdriver until, you know, any more than a little bit of pressure was too much. And I stopped, and it gave it plenty of grab. All right, so now the next thing I did, my air tank's back here grabbing my leg, is I go ahead and put the screw head into my vise and lock it down. And this is just assuming that you cannot reach in and grab that brass piece and actually pull your regulator out, because that's how they show it in their video. I could not, I'm telling you, I punched myself in the eye. True story. I locked my regulator into my vise. I grabbed a hold of that thing with my, you know, really aggressive tipped pliers and started pulling and literally pop myself right in the eye. I mean, that's how tough this thing was to get out. So if yours comes out, awesome. If it doesn't, this is one way you can do it. The next thing I did was I grabbed my crescent wrench. This is all rubber, very, very easily. And I just lightly tapped on my regulator housing. There it goes. And you'll see it doesn't take a lot of force. Just kind of keep giving it a little bit until it finally just lets go. So now we can back this out. And you'll see, I mean, it's like barely in there. I mean, literally, let's see, I'll put my thumbnail on the end of it. That's literally how far I went into that. You guys see that much? That's it. That's all it took. Just basically get one of the big threads to lock into that. You're all set. That is your regulator. Inside of this housing, though, be careful because your valve is in there. Okay, so this is the valve that actually drops into here, which comes out the other end, which your hammer strikes on and opens up your valve. So just make sure that that stays in there. All right, now the rest is really simple. It's just basically setting your regulator, and then from there, just reassembling the gun. So the way that this regulator works is not off this little silver bolt. It's actually off this brass bolt. And you can literally just turn this thing out and in. Out and in. And I'm going to get a little bit closer to the camera for a second because I want you guys to see exactly what I'm talking about. You can screw it out or you can screw it in. Okay? I can tell you right now that the way that it should come from the factory is about 110 bar. Okay? The more that you screw it out, the greater the pressure will be. The more that you screw it in, the less the pressure will be. Okay? So I'm going to set mine right back to about where I had it. But yay. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and reassemble my regulator. All right. So if for some reason this little spring comes off the end, just go ahead and push it back onto the tip of the end of that bolt. Simply take this, make sure that your valve stem is sticking out of the bottle. I would recommend, and I'm not going to do it because I've already done it, take a little super lube or whatever lithium, or grease you have laying around for your air guns. I highly recommend super lube. You definitely do not want to put anything petroleum based in this. You will blow your gun to pieces. So don't use anything except like super lube, honestly. Go ahead and set your regulator in and just start working it in slowly, 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 slowly. And then you're going to get to a point where the regulator doesn't want to go any further. Now you could probably push that with your thumb if you really wanted to, but it hurts my hands. So what I do is, you could do this with a piece of PVC, small PVC pipe. You could do this with a small socket off of a socket set. I use a 10-in-1 screwdriver. Just make sure that it goes over, it doesn't wreck the tip on this nipple here. Go ahead and set it in there, and then what I do is I just take my wrench once more in my hand, not hard, and I just tap, tap, tap until it drives my regulator back down into the tube. All right, so that's all there is to it. Now, the unfortunate part, because there is, every time that you want to change your regulator, and especially if you're going to test your regulator, you have to do this entire process again. However, if you grab, and I've done this, and I'm not going to post these results, and I'll tell you why, because your regulator just might not be exactly the same as mine, and I don't want anybody coming back to me and going, dude, that was a bullshit reading. Grab yourself a pair of calipers, and you can actually measure the distance that your brass nut is actually screwed out or in, okay? So, all right, we got that back together. Don't forget your O-ring. I've done this before. Ask me how many times? A lot. Go ahead and seat it back in there. Once again, these have all been lubed recently. And not only that, if your gun is brand new, you're going to notice it's going to come pretty well lubed up. I mean, unless they're looking really dry, you probably don't even need to add any extra lube. Go ahead and push that back in. And then you'll just look in the end of the holes there, kind of lining, making sure that all three are lined up. And then also making sure that this bolt and this gauge are on the same plane. Okay, you don't want this gauge on the other side of the gun. It wouldn't work out because there's no holes for it. So then just go ahead and take your three bolts here, put them back in, grab your 4mm wrench, and just go ahead and, I guess I'm not exactly lined up. There we go. Should be better. And then just go ahead and screw them back in. They go in real easy. If you're feeling any kind of resistance, stop. Something's wrong. These are well machined bolts, and they literally they will. I mean, you can see I'm just basically just twisting, and it's going in. So definitely don't stress about that. Just take your time, realign it, and then move on. All right, so here we are. We're back to, let's clamp the tube back into the vise and reassemble the tube to the gun. Now, like I said, your gun, I can't speak exactly on what it comes, with. But two things that you want to make sure of. This writing that's on your tube that talks about your fill pressure and your, all that in your tube, you want that to be lined up with these gauges, okay? So when you're reassembling this, make sure that you end up to a point where these gauges and that writing are on the same level, okay? Because it will matter. Well, I mean, you're going to want to see it anyway. So go ahead and tighten this back up, getting our piece in there. I can tell you I reef on mine pretty good in my vise, and I haven't caused any damage yet. So, don't be afraid, because otherwise it will turn. It is literally turned in there that hard, and it takes a good amount of effort to tighten this back up. Now there's O-rings in here, so I mean, I've actually reassembled it and not had it quite all the way back around to the way that it came from the factory, but I've had it definitely real close. And then at the end, I just like to kind of give it a good jamming. So just to kind of seat it the best that I can. All right, pull our tube out, and there we go. So now, here we are. We have our tube back together. We can go ahead and take our M10-1 or M10 or 10 millimeter bolt, extra fine, set it to the side. We're going to go ahead and take our bottle pressure gauge, and we're just going to gently screw this in by hand. Make sure that both of them are just about as hand tight as you can get them. They don't have to be, extra tight with your hand. And then we're going to take our wrenches, and we're just going to give these a 1/4 of a turn. That's it. Just until they start to really tighten up. It should be a 1/4 to a 1/2 a turn, more like a 1/4, because there are seats in there, and I probably should have covered that, and I do apologize, but there are some little plastic seats in the bottom of these. I've just done this so often that I know that they didn't come out because I looked before I screwed it back in. I just failed to mention it to you guys. Now, there are two trains of thought behind this. One is go ahead and fill this tube full of air to give it a test of where your regulator is set. However, mine's probably going to be relatively close to where I was at. So you can do that if you wish, but in the meantime, I'm just going to show you how to reassemble the gun. You're going to take your block. You're going to take your tube. You're going to put your tube so that the dimples on the bottom of the tube line up with the two holes here on our block. And then you can just go ahead and push them together until we can look in the hole and see the little nipples. We'll start with our flathead. Stick our flathead in there and get that started. Grabbing our screwdriver again just to tighten this up. Then we're going to grab our little, we're going to grab our 3 millimeter wrench and grab our little set screw there. Go ahead and drop it into the back one. Once again, if you guys feel any kind of major resistance, stop. They're not, it doesn't take much. Once it seats, I just kind of give it a little snug. You don't have to try to strip this thing out, because if you do, you will. All right. So next thing, we're going to grab our barrel shroud and our, turn this thing around, and our rail and trigger assembly. We're going to go ahead and drop that down to where this locks into there. Grab that. Grab our little silver nut, put that on there. Grab our 3 millimeter again. That's 4. Grab our 3 millimeter again. and turn this in and just gingerly tighten that. Then we're going to grab our end cap and our moderator. I just happen to have a moderator on here, line it up with the tube, just start threading, and it will, if I can grab the thread, there we go. Screw this on. Like I said, this is a tension barrel and shroud, so as you tighten this, it will put tension on the barrel, everywhere else, and on and on. So at this point, we'll go ahead and grab our little bench buddy again, stick the gun into the hair, and now on the trigger, there's a washer. All right, let me show you guys that. There is a washer here, and a spring, and then another clip. Okay, so it's like a washer with a spring in the middle of it. You want to make sure that washer is on the outside of this trigger mechanism. Ask me how I know. You already know. We're going to grab our little pin for our trigger assembly, and it only goes in from the non-cocking side of the gun towards the cocking side. Okay, so look at your gun. It goes from the non-cocking lever side to the cocking lever side. All right, and then there we have that. We can go ahead and grab our there we go. And then this thing's kind of interesting. Sometimes it goes together really, really smooth. As much as I've had this thing apart, man, I've kind of gotten it down now. But don't be frustrated. It will go back together, and then just, you know, give this a decent crank to get the gun back together. So that's really all there is to it. Now, obviously, one more thing that we have to do is to actually fill the gun with air and see where our regulator's at. Hopefully my tank has enough air. I've been filling this gun for the last couple of days, and I shot my Maverick today and I topped that off. So I've been taxing my tank quite a bit. So I'm just going to flip this over so that I can see my gauge. And we are going to fill this to 200 bar. This particular gun is a 200 bar fill. I know some of the other Aselkons are 250 bar, but this one is a 200 fill. So I do have a regulator, or I have a regulated bottle, so it's slow. It fills slow on its own. All right, there we go. 200 bar. Disconnect our fill port. Put my cap back in there so I don't jack it up. And at this point now, I have, and this is actually good. I actually am now at 90 bar on my regulator. So just like any other gun, put it on fire, give it a cock, safe direction, and oh, there it goes. I've been playing with my trigger lately, so don't judge me. But yeah, so now I'm up to about 100 bar. So 100 bar works out good for me because I was at about 110, and now I want to start fine-tuning my gun for myself. I can go ahead and take my scope, mount it back on my gun, and we're all set. If you find that the regulator pressure is not where you want it and not maybe what you need from it, then, you know, by all means, take it back apart, do it again. One thing I do want to talk about, and I do apologize, guys, I kind of got carried away for a second, but this is going to be important. Let me loosen this back off. Take this back off. pull this out, is your hammer adjustment. That is right here, okay? And I believe it is a 10 millimeter. And this is actually where I was playing with my trigger too. I had my trigger all the way adjusted in, which is why it was giving me, you know, like a hard time going off. So maybe back it off a half a turn and give it a cocking, fire. Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely headed in a little too far. So that's where I was running into my trigger issues. So we can use this for now, but that is your hammer adjustment there. Turning it all the way in, obviously more pressure. Turning it all the way out, better pressure. So I'm going to go ahead and back mine back out to factory, which is flush. And apparently I have some other issues with my trigger that I need to address. My fault. I'm the one who's been in here playing around. So not any fault of Aselkon. This is literally I've been just kind of goofing around and seeing what I can do. So, but there you have it. That is how you can go ahead and set your reg pressure, set your hammer, and, you know, have at it. If you guys have any questions, like I said, by all means, and this is actually what I was doing, just in case you guys were wondering. I was playing with this tube on the bottom, or this bar on the bottom, because this is supposed to help adjust your trigger, right? So now if I cock the gun, you know, see, I'm having a hard time getting it to pull forward. So you can actually shorten this bar. There you go. That's what I was doing. So now the trigger's back to where, you know, it should be. See? Just that little bit. That's all it took. But now I'm back to, you know, great trigger. No problems. So just so you guys know, I just wanted to make sure that you guys understand that it's nothing to do with the Aselkon. It is totally me. I'm a tinkerer. I watch people do things and I go, oh, what's this do? And then I start playing with things. And then we have issues later on that I now have to figure out how to fix. So that's all I was doing. I was just playing around with that, trying to see if I could loosen or whatnot on my trigger itself. So once again, if you guys have any questions about your Aselkon, your regulator, you know, any other questions that you guys have, please drop them in the comments below. I will return an answer as long as they're an appropriate question. Please, no freaking trolling, as I just have no time. I'm an adult. You should be too. Let's just keep this as an adult conversation. But like I said, if you guys have any questions, I'm Moose. This is Airguns of Michigan. Thanks for tuning in to this guide on how to tune your Aselkon. Pretty much quite a few of them, but this one in particular, the MX7 Max 5S. Take care.